Hey, this is Kristin from Drive Mode Show, and I'm here with Sue Mead. I'm so excited to talk to her. She is an off-road expert and much awarded journalist. Welcome, Sue.
Thanks. It's great to be on and talk about something that I have so much passion for.
So tell our viewers at Drive Mode Show about how you got started, how you became an off-road expert.
I started my automotive career in 1988 at Four Wheeler Magazine. I had come from the world of mainstream journalism and had done a variety of news, including being an AP photographer and news photographer for local newspapers and other outlets. And it was during that time that I met and gave some special attention and perhaps a little mentorship to a man named Peter McGillivray. And I helped him his last year of high school. We loved doing news together. After college, he went to California to pursue his news career, couldn't find a job in it, and found a job at Four Wheeler Magazine. The really funny thing, Kristin, is that at that time, four-wheeling was not really a mainstream activity, nor did the market reflect that. It was not laden with 60 to 70% of sales as SUVs and trucks and 4x4 models and now overlanding. That just was not what the culture was. At that time, I like to describe it as the red plaid boys, although I was a girl that wore red plaid. And what that was, often, although not all, of the buyers of four-wheel drive vehicles were hunters and people who really enjoyed outdoor backwoods pursuits, perhaps had boats. It's not that four-wheel drive wasn't on the planet, but at that time, manufacturers were not looking to make women and multiple groups of buyers aware of the benefits of four-wheel drive and of four-wheeling. So I really started almost 40 years ago, is that? But 40 years ago in my news career and 30 some years ago in the world of four-wheeling and automotive.
It's a lot of fun, isn't it?
You know, it's so much fun. Just really quick note, I had 5 years before come to a very serious juncture where I was critically ill. And while I was lying in the hospital bed, not knowing whether I would survive, I prayed for two things. One, to see my daughter graduate from high school, and the other was to see the world before I died. And I didn't have the money. I had no means. I'd grown up in a middle-class family, and four-wheeling and automotive has been the way for me to do that. And I feel I use the term blessed a lot. I truly am blessed. For me, that was answered prayer. But what's still shocking to me is that cars have, and off-roading and off-road racing and off-road expeditions have taken me to more than 70 countries. So you can see why I feel like, wow, it's not only fun, but it met my desires to learn a skill set that would take me to the lands beyond, which is what I love.
Yeah, it's really special to be able to do what you love and see the world at the same time. It really is a blessing. I get it. Tell me about a special race that has a place in your heart, you know, a really good memory of a competition.
It's easy to come up with my favorite. I've done almost 30,000 miles of off-road racing around the world in a number of different countries, but my very favorite was the 2011 Dakar rally. That year, it was in South America, and we raced from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the Atlantic all the way over through Chile and the Atacama Desert. to the Pacific Ocean and back, 6,000 miles of racing and 4,000 miles of transit, which is part of off-road racing often. I was in a small class of vehicles that were called stock production. We were allowed to have a little bit of upfit. And I was incredibly fortunate that I had the new then Ford Raptor. And I was racing with very talented Darren Skilton, who I'd raced with before. And we won. We won our class. This was unheard of. There have been no racers from North or South America then that had won a class. This year, we had some wonderful three guys that took their class wins and took the class category overall. But at that time, there were no folks from the US. One of the reasons it's a very expensive race to compete in, to get your vehicle, say, to South America, and to do the training and to have your team. But when we won, and I need to say I was given a lot of the credit because there's always a driver of record, but I was a team of 5. We had 2 mechanics, my co-driver, Darren Skilton, who also did a great deal of the driving and navigating, and someone I believe you know, Chris Collard, who's really well known in the off-road and automotive community, was our media manager. And as you know, media is everything. Unless you're extremely wealthy, you just can't go out and do this on your own. It's costly, and manufacturers and sponsors will help. I did not get some support from Ford so that I could keep myself clean as a journalist, not encumbered by taking dollars from them.
Right, right. What would you say are some of the most challenging aspects of off-road racing like that?
I think it's a challenge. Well, I've had some particularly unusual challenges. I was in the Dakar in Africa in 2000, and there were Islamic dissident terrorists wanting to do harm to us. And
wow,
they had already killed people. So it was a very serious threat. So we were airlifted to Libya for safety, one of my favorite lines to use from my automotive career. So there can be dangers. And part of my worry with that, I've had that happen on a couple of other trips. In particular, when I did the Gazelle Rally, there were threats, and we had to start in Nice, France instead of Paris. My greatest worry is not only for the safety of myself and my teammates, and mostly my teammates. I feel pretty well prepared from all my survival skills training, but it's really hard. I have a daughter who's been very worried about me when I race and when I'm in places like that around the world. So I think what's challenging is that when you're off-road racing, you're not at an arena at a track where there's an ambulance nearby. You have to have a set of your own skills to help with an accident or an injury or a vehicle fire, and getting lost and keeping your cool, which is something people don't always think about, not only if there's danger but stress. When you are teamed with another person, be it a man or a woman, it really doesn't matter. When you're together for that long, night and day, and you're competing, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have tough times. So it's very different from traditional racing. One of the benefits is that traditional racing, you might notice how slim and handsome most of the drivers are that do NASCAR and other track racing, and there sure are some women there too. They're usually young and very slim. And as off-roaders, we don't have to be either. So I love that.
You can race and eat donuts or do whatever you want, right?
Right. Yeah, you can have a little belly going on.
Who do you think is a really interesting up-and-coming off-road racer?
That's a great question. I've spent some time the last couple of years getting to know Shane Redline and his son, Jax Redline, who's 15. And Jax has had the good fortune of coming from a family where he's been able to train and race now for 3 years. His dad owns a trucking company in Texas. They have 360 over-the-road trucks. They're helping us during this time right now. And Jax has had the good fortune of having a dad who could pay the dollars to get him in early and to have a team helping him. He's been a gentleman. I was going to race with him a couple of days on the ground in the Nora Mexican 1000 this month, which, as you know, was canceled. But he's very talented, and he has natural talent, which is important. He's also had a number of people he's been able to train with, and that can also be important. It's been one of the most helpful things for me, is to train with so many different experts and learn something from each of them.
A lot of the time when I talk to people in automotive, it seems so many people picked up that passion from a parent. And like for me, my dad took me to car shows when I was growing up. I'm trying to think of her name. Yeah, there's a lot of different people who say, yeah, my dad took me to races, or their parents did. You know, is that something that you had the benefit of? How did you pick up the sport?
What I loved was the woods, or what I often refer to as the lands beyond the backcountry. My dad brought me hunting with him and taught me about the woods, and animals in the woods and tracks. My brother, who was a year younger, and I were great explorers, and we fashioned ourselves as early adventurers in many ways. And it was when I came into automotive, even though I had had a very small on-off-road motorcycle when I was a teen that I shared with my brother, I knew nothing about it, how it ran, why it ran, and I didn't care. And when I came into automotive, honestly, I didn't care about what make things work. I had to learn very quickly. And some of those early systems were more primitive, and therefore sometimes more intervention on the part of the driver. We're pretty fortunate many times today. Many of the functions and drive programs take care of us. But when I came into automotive, my desire was to see the world and to see the backcountry of the world. I wanted to see things that I had seen in National Geographic growing up. And I did. I saw people pulling log boats and elephants and things in the wild. But some of my travels have been very exotic, and I really like to come back to the fact that some of my greatest adventures early on in my career were nearby on trails, but in places like Big Bend National Park, where I went to pre-run the Ford Raptor with a off-roading friend. We did 1,000 miles there, and I'm hoping to get back there with the new Ford Bronco. But there are so many trails in the US that you don't have to go to Mexico. You don't have to go to Morocco. That sounds very glamorous. I've been fortunate that those things have lined up. But there's so many ways that people can get into the backcountry. And again, for me, it's what I see there, the quietness, the beauty of the land. But now, as you know, I've really become an advocate for know your vehicle, know where you're going, follow the rules of safety for four-wheeling, and have an idea about how you're going to get out should you have an emergency.
Those are all really valuable life skills to have, for sure. And like you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation here, overlanding has become a thing, way more than it ever was now. You know, more and more vehicles are being outfitted with the kind of things that you need to go off-roading. What do you think it's really important for somebody to know who doesn't have a lot of experience off-roading?
Well, it's an interesting question today because four-wheeling became very popular. There was already a fan following, but it became very popular in the early 2000s. And what I noticed was when we had our first economic downfall from starting 2008 to 2011, and that period of time when the economy crashed and people stopped taking traditional vacations, many more people started to go into the backcountry to fix up their vehicle or to go camping with their family. And I see some of that is happening right now. But as far as overlanding, overlanding has become a very popular term right now and a bit of a popular pursuit for manufacturers, especially. A number of manufacturers are starting to set up a vehicle with a pop-up tent on the roof, a little bit more four-wheel drive prowess for the vehicle. And I'm very excited about that. And I think this year's Rebel Rally is going to have some entries that might fall into that category. But what's really important is always to know your vehicle. And some of the add-ons, for instance, the steps or side steps that were on a vehicle I drove not long ago to provide access to the rooftop tent, had a platform that went underneath the vehicle. And this vehicle might, on a good day, might have had 6.5, maybe 7 inches of ground clearance. And with this platform and metal support underneath the vehicle, it was greatly encumbered. But one of the things, the ground clearance was far less. Does it matter on the road or at a roadside campground? Not at all, unless you drive up on a rock and you high center on that. So one of the things I love to tell people, just a really important tip, get on your back, get on the ground and look at your vehicle. What's underneath it? Where are your low points? Usually they're the differentials. And your differentials, if you have a four-wheel drive vehicle, you're going to have a front differential and a back differential. Those are the pumpkins. And a lot of times people think that they're in line with each other. They're not on all vehicles. One might be to the left in line with the driver, and one might be to the far right. So if you have a rock to go over, you're going to plan accordingly. And so there are so many videos that people can watch. There are so many clubs. Never go alone. Probably ever have I done it? Yes, don't tell anyone. Peter McGillivray, who now was with Four Wheeler Magazine and was my entree to the magazine and to four-wheeling and my career. Peter has been, for many years, was the Vice President of Communications for SEMA, and very much in the industry, and has another big industry job at the moment. But Peter and I once got stuck on an Easter Sunday morning when the two of us went four-wheeling together thinking, we know what we're doing. And we got hopelessly stuck miles from people on the top of a mountain. And so I developed one thought, which was, if you ever are really alone, put a little bike in the back of the truck or the car. So if you have to bike out, that would be easier. But really go with other people. Big tip, join a club. Find people who are like-minded or go on a Jeep Jamboree. Get the tips, the tricks, get with experts, and know what you're doing before you go. And make sure you have good survival equipment for far longer, with water and food and medical supplies. And I'm just going to throw out one thing, or maybe two: high lift jack and some kind of traction enhancing product, something like a Max Trax that can go underneath your tires. And there are other tips beyond that, but that's kind of an overview.
That's a primer. All right, so you've been in this industry for a few decades.
Mm-hmm.
As a woman, what do you see as the difference between when you started and now?
That's a good question. When I started, there were very few women on the scene. I was the first woman that stuck to it at Four Wheeler magazine. I came in, and really by the mid 90s, I was being called an expert female because for off-roading and off-road expertise, CNN called me and asked me to do some TV with them because they wanted a voice, and they thought it was cool that they could get a female voice. But there were many women that were in the automotive industry, smaller numbers. What I've seen over the years is that there are so many women in our industry. There are so many women in off-road racing, in four-wheeling. I just spoke with Charlene Bauer last night, who runs the Ladies Off-Road Network, and she has thousands of enthusiasts. She's developing some really cool programs for this coronavirus time that are a lot of campfire chats that are virtual and a lot of how-tos. That's a really good resource for folks to go to. And she's including men now, which is very exciting. So there are so many resources. I got distracted in that. So what I see today is that there are so many women in off-road racing, and the kind of rally driving, like the Rebel Rally, that's growing every year. And in our automotive industry, that's how you and I know each other, there are so many more women and more knowledgeable women. There are women who really, like me in the beginning, really don't care that much about what makes the car tick, but know that they have to have some modicum of language to talk about it, a vehicle, and to inspire others, be it with a purchase or even how to drive safely in a minivan.
Do you feel that you get more respect now as a woman than you did when you first started, or did you always feel like that wasn't a challenge for you?
I have been really fortunate, and I have heard other women over the years struggle with that, and I think very much less so than ever. And by the way, we also have to point out, we are a journalist community of women that have grown. I see more women in engineering and design and in PR communications from every manufacturer. And some of them, I find surprisingly, were there 30 years ago, but they weren't put to the forefront. So I think the face of women in our industry has really grown. But I was very fortunate. The men that trained me at Four Wheeler magazine, including John Stewart, who was my first sort of mentor trainer, who was the editor of the magazine, were so respectful of me. And they just taught me things like, don't ever fake it. If you don't know, don't say it. Or we also don't want you to vote on a vehicle because we all voted on it. What do you like about it? You think about how it fits you. You ask us advice and information. But once I came into the mainstream automotive world, I felt like I carried respect because I had started at a four-wheel drive magazine. And perhaps, and I feel in general very well respected in the field. I'm on some short lists if there's an expedition being planned, like there was last summer to Australia, and there might be next year. I'm on a short list, and no one is saying, let's bring Sue, she's a woman. I know the idea is, let's bring Sue because she has survival skills. She can go for a month. She knows how to drive. Her patience might be thin when it comes to technology, but it's very thick when it comes to getting out of a stuck situation and putting up a tent in places where there's snakes and spiders. So I do feel very well respected. I appreciate that it has been hard for other women. And I really like to call out all the men who, this is a tricky spot to talk about. When I was first, for many years in my life, there was the women's movement, and there were women coming after men because there were old boys clubs, and appropriately. And today we have we've turned the tables a bit, and there have been many races that are for women only. If guys were doing for men only races right now, we'd be putting our fists in the air. And there are a lot of things right now where, as I said, the tables have kind of turned, but all the women I know embrace men in the field and have men working on their teams or training them in the mechanics of things. And Charlene Bauer, as I said, now 5 years in, is inviting men and children around the campfire and doing things with them as well. So not sure how you have experienced it. I've really been fortunate.
I have been very fortunate as well. And I'm definitely outside of the industry. I've experienced people like, oh, you're a woman and you know about cars, or you like cars, and they find that unusual. But within the industry, I found a ton of support. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
One other thing I'd like to add to the conversation about men in the industry and their support. I feel that one of my greatest one of the things that I have brought to the table has been my enthusiasm and to say what I know and to say what I don't know and to ask questions about what I don't know. And over the years, men have really appreciated that I have said, I have no idea what I think about that IFR suspension on that Volvo mock-up right now, and face the look of a male colleague who's looked at me like, what? You didn't grow up knowing car headlights in the dark? And the answer is no. But I think that people like to be asked questions. I'm enjoying you asking me these. Everyone who has expertise, most people like to share it. And I would encourage women to ask and not stand to the back of the crowd, to sit with a man at dinner who has asked good questions, or who you have heard, to say to another person, who's an expert here on four-wheeling, or who's an expert on safety, or who really knows coupes and convertibles or something. Get to know people in the industry, get to know men in the industry. If you're a woman and you're daunted, ask them to share with you. And I think that most really enjoy it. And that's a way for us all to equalize and grow.
I think there are some wonderful men in the industry as well. Stephen Cole Smith comes to mind. Ron Sessions is really great to talk to. Some of the PR guys. And yeah, we're working more hand in hand, I think, than ever. And it's great to hear you talk about that. I could talk to you all day. You're just a fascinating subject. You have so much to offer. And I really appreciate that you took some time with us today to talk about your career and some of the tips that you've learned along the way.
Well, it was really fun. And by the way, those are two men that I just adore. They're smart, they're talented, they've been in the business for years. I used to work for Ron. And as you said, there's so many more. So thanks.
Thank you, Sue. This has been Drive Mode Show with Sue Mead. Have a great day.